Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Welcome to our Ritual Night Talk for May 11th, hosted by Leaping Laughter OTO. I'm Scott Stenwick, your host for these Ritual Night events. I've included a couple of links in the description to the video. Had to figure out how to do a description in the video. You have to do the extra edit step, then put it in. It doesn't prompt you. Okay, figured that out this time. So my learning curve on YouTube is continuing there. So a couple of I've shared two articles. First article is again the magical instruction page. I'm going to be referring to that. So if people want to take a look at it, they can find that page with all of the information that is there, and it is a lot, from following that link. The other piece that I'm going to talk about a little bit tonight is my most recent blog post over on Algoides titled "We Must Say What We Mean." And it was a response to a couple of blog posts by a fellow blogger, Nick Farrell, who was talking about how magicians kind of obfuscate things. You hear that in orders, when you tell them, oh, it's above your degree, it means I don't know, things like that. Okay, and you can read through the list. It's funny, but also probably recognizable if you've spent a lot of time in the occult community. So, and I also have included the donation link for Leaping Laughter. Take a look at the page, read it closely. I had a question about the subscription links on there, like a per month donation and so on. You do not need to make a per month donation to Leaping Laughter. You can just go to that page and you can use the top button to donate any amount you want. All donations are appreciated. No donations are too small. They help to support our operations as an OTO body here in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota. With that, I am doing this talk on YouTube, as you can see. As you're here, you can see that it's on YouTube, just like we did the Elixir Rite last week. And the reason that we're working on making this transition, people are not necessarily going to be happy, whatever we do. But the reason we're making this transition is we're trying to make these videos more available to a wider audience that aren't necessarily on Facebook. And there are people in magic and esotericism that we know who are not on Facebook for various reasons, not only because it's, the evil Zuckerberg data harvesting empire, but also some people find it annoying. Some people find it irrelevant. Some people find that it is, the basis of the downfall of civilization. Now, we're still here. YouTube is still owned by Google. So it's not like, we can really get away without having, some sort of corporate supported platform for our live streams. But part of the point here is that with these videos, you'll be able to find our channel online, even with a YouTube app on your television even, you don't necessarily need to log in to read this. These are all public and so on. And so the idea is that the YouTube channel should have greater accessibility for more people. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make this stuff available to a wider audience. So, that being said, I'm going to do kind of part 3 of the Exotericism talk. I've previously done 2 other talks on this topic. I think it's important. If you are just finding us here on YouTube and want to know what the other parts are, I will give you a basic and brief summary of what I mean when I talk about exotericism. Okay, and apologies if this is repetitive from people who've seen the earlier videos, but just from the standpoint of, our YouTube audience, I just want to summarize a bit here. So magic has been associated with esotericism for a very long time. It also has been associated with the occult. And both of those words allude to something that is hidden or secret, okay? And now, because of that, magic as it was taught, from, the Renaissance on, really up until the early part of the 20th century, magic was considered this secret thing that you had to join some special, order. They had to admit you had to do all this stuff. Then you would learn the order's take on how the mysteries worked. And, you didn't really interact with people from other orders. You didn't share information. You didn't share anything on practical technique. You just worked the system as you were taught, okay? And because of that, Magic as a discipline has turned out to be this thing that is centuries, I think probably about 2 centuries behind where the physical sciences are today. And the physical sciences got where they were by practicing the scientific method. So you have experiments, you have publication, you have peer review, you have replication. And it's this very formal process. And for 200 years, there was nothing like that in magic. Okay. Aleister Crowley, whatever you think of him, I mean, I'm a member of the OTO. So, I mean, obviously, I have a lot of respect for his work. Aleister Crowley was really the first magician to take magic and say, all right, we're going to try to approach this in a more scientific way. And so when he started publishing material in the Equinox around 1910, he talked about, he set up his idea of the AA magical order, and the motto of the AA is the method of science, the aim of religion. And so what Crowley was really talking about was trying to pull magic out of these esoteric shadows and into a place where you could at least be more scientific about it. Now, there's a problem with magic, and that is that consciousness is one of the main variables in a magical operation. And we didn't have a good way to measure consciousness back in Crowley's day, except, well, here's some kind of subjective account, see if it's kind of similar. But of course, you've already read the subjective account. It's going to influence, your idea of what you're experiencing, and it winds up being a lot more complicated. So what we have in magic is more like what you see in a soft science like psychology. But it is also true that, psychology has made great strides in terms of, trying to take things that are fundamentally not, as definitive and develop ideas around them that have proved useful in a number of situations for people and are replicatable up to a point. Over the last 10 years in the soft sciences, there has been this, what was called a replication crisis, in that several of the very large prominent studies, when they tried to replicate them, they found that, it doesn't quite work that way. And there's also this whole thing about this thing called p-hacking, which has to do with, so you do a psychological experiment and you don't really get a positive result, but then you want to get a positive result because people don't want to see negative results published. And so what you do is you mess around with the statistics until you get some kind of a relationship out of the thing that looks statistically significant. But a lot of it is akin to kind of just playing tricks with the math. So, and studies like that often don't replicate. And I will point out that the fact that there are problems replicating some studies in science is not some kind of indictment of the scientific method, which is some of the stuff that I see online every so often. It means that the scientific method is working as designed. Science is supposed to be self-correcting. If a study goes out there and maybe there were a couple of replications at the time, but then later people try to replicate it and go back, well, it challenges the initial conclusions, which is the entire point. That is what we do in the sciences. And it's not really what we do in magic. Okay, so even if you are following the method of science, the aim of religion, you're journaling and you're doing all this stuff to track, what your results look like under different circumstances, there still is this kind of secrecy idea floating around magic, that it should be hidden or edgy, or it should be, divorced from everyday reality. And I would say, by making the statement that I think that magic should move in an exoteric direction, I would say that I'm not really in favor of that. I think that if our magical results are out there in the public, they can be reviewed, they can be replicated, people try them, people report, hey, does this work or doesn't it work, and so on. That is a process more akin to science and more akin to having magic out in the open. And there really is no advantage to this secrecy idea in magic anyway, because the fact is that at its base, magic is essentially a result. The experiences that you have as a magician when you're doing things are not really experiences that you can communicate accurately to other people anyway. It's like the secrecy that you have in magic is really about, it's not so much, I'll tell you this thing and then you'll know what I'm talking about. Is Well, you've got to go do this thing. I mean, I can give you these instructions, you follow these instructions, and then you experience what happens. Okay. And so that's kind of more what I mean by exotericism. When I wrote my two Enochian books, Mastering the Mystical Heptarchy and Mastering the Great Table, I deliberately did them as kind of a cookbook approach to magic. They're primarily a series of steps. The whole books are all structured based on the stages of ritual and so on, and you can just go through it and follow the instructions. And it's not so much here's all this stuff you have to memorize or analyze or anything like that. It's like just start doing this and see what happens. So that's what I mean by exotericism. Okay. And so the reference to that article that I have posted there about we must say what we mean is that, frankly, this idea of the magician as trickster or obfuscator or whatever is extremely detrimental to the development of magic as a discipline. It's one of these things that it allows fraudulent psychics to operate because people don't really know how magic and psychic abilities work. It allows things like satanic panics to pop up because people don't understand what magic is and they don't understand how it works. They allow just ridiculous misconceptions to be thrown around. And even in some parts of the world, I mean, not here in the United States generally, but in other places in the world where, belief in magic is more widespread than it is here, it results in, I mean, people can be lynched because, well, they're a magician and what you do is, well, okay, again, not necessarily understanding, well, okay, so first of all, those things are, social forces or whatnot, but the idea that magicians have powers to do certain of these things, like, oh, I had a terrible year, and so I know my neighbor must have hexed my crop or something like that. It's like, well, maybe your neighbor could do that. Why would they? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. People have this idea in terms of motivation that magic is like about evil for evil's sake. Human beings don't operate that way. Or I would argue that if you find someone who does operate that way, you're probably looking at an individual with, some kind of psychological issue going on. I'm not going to characterize what it might or might not be because I don't want to stigmatize anything. But this is not somebody who is operating from a particularly sane perspective. I mean, even in a legal sense. So in a legal sense, sane perspective is not necessarily a person who's mentally ill, but it's a person who doesn't really understand that what they're doing is wrong. And if you meet somebody who, what I did is I hexed their field for great justice or something, generally speaking, I think there's a level of confusion there. Because, usually I can't necessarily say in all situations, but what I will say is that I think it is likely that type of thing is, something that's going to be spurious. So we want to be honest when we talk about stuff. We want to be able to say what we mean. And it's important that we say what we mean. Okay. And so when you say, I magically can do thus and such, you want to make sure that you're not falling into the skeptic trap, and also the magic persecutor trap, like you find in satanic panic things, which is the idea that if you can do one paranormal thing, obviously you can do all paranormal things. And well, that just isn't true. Magic has limits, but those limits are poorly understood. And the reason they're poorly understood is because people keep magic and their magical results a secret. Okay, that's what's going on. And so when you sit now, well, maybe I could, do some completely ridiculous thing, but oh, well, I don't want to talk about how I do that or anything like that. It's like, come on. Okay, what's going on there is that's somebody who's trying to make themselves sound important because they do magic and magic is ooky spooky and the people I'm talking about don't actually understand it. I think that if people understood magic, they would realize that, well, it's okay. So it's a combination of two things. Foundationally, it is the Western system of enlightenment. So you have foundational practices like meditation, working with your mind. If you don't learn how to work with your mind, you're not going to be a very good magician. Okay. And then once you get into the magical side of it, actually making things happen, there are other techniques that build on the basic meditation idea of working with your mind, because essentially any magical operation, even a practical one, is a series of states of consciousness activated in a particular order and possibly in conjunction with other manifestations of consciousness, which could be other magicians, could be spirits, could be deities, could be a lot of things, okay? But manifestations of consciousness and acting in a way that produces some kind of physical change in the level of, probability space of the world around you, okay? Magicians can make unlikely things happen. Generally speaking, magicians can't make impossible things happen. And I don't mean it as a tautology. I mean an impossible thing that has a probability of 0. Generally speaking, you can't turn that into a success. You need something out. You need some likelihood of something happening in order to shape it into what you want. But again, this is an area that is hamstrung by the lack of, really focused research. Okay. And, if we research this and if we worked on this, you could take it and you could say, hey, all right, so we think that a magician at this level of experience should be able to do about an, X to 1 probability shift. Okay. You take that as the base. You say, all right, well, we can do that. And then what can we do to change that, to amplify it, to alter it, to make it work better, and so on. And this is a thing that, again, you're not going to have this, okay, if you have this continued idea that magic is esoteric and it's secret and it's occult and hidden and all that, okay? Basically, magic is about, first of all, knowing yourself and becoming acquainted with your mind, okay? That is, the mystical side of it, but that mystical side of it is really the foundation. As you do more meditation and you get better at working with your mind, you're going to get better at shifting your consciousness different ways. I talked in a previous video about comparing Aleister Crowley's The Science and Art of Causing Change and Conformity with Will with Dion Fortune's The Science and Art of Changing Consciousness in Accordance with Will. And how really, as long as consciousness is taken as a totality, which I think it should, your consciousness is your entire sphere of sensation, your aura, however you want to think about it, that they really are synonymous. Because to produce a change, again, you are setting certain things in your consciousness in a particular order in such a way as you can wind up producing an effect. And that effect is a probability shift on the world around you. In effect, magic could be thought of at its absolute most basic. It's the power to control luck. And luck can do a lot. I think anybody who lives in the United States probably understands that luck plays an enormous role in virtually everything. Maybe not necessarily quite as much of a role as it plays in, stricter, more traditional societies. Like, where, okay, well, if you're just, born into a certain station in life, that's just kind of where you stay. Apparently, from some of what I've been reading, the British Empire was a lot like that in the Victorian era, okay? And so you already had this luck coming in of, what your station was in life. And, to a degree, obviously, there were people who became successful despite coming from the lower classes and so on. But we're talking about a statistical whole overall. And the United States generally has been more upwardly mobile than societies like that. Although there are also some technical challenges that we have here, like things like education, healthcare, and so forth that, are much more restrictive than in other developed countries. But that being said, once you've done everything you can do, what do? My answer is magic, okay? If you want to get a job, that's cool. Do your job spell, but also make sure you send out those resumes. And by the way, I want to also make it clear that that is not some kind of a dodge, like saying, well, what the ritual really does, it just motivates you to send out more resumes. No, if it's successful, it should increase the likelihood of every one of those resumes being accepted and get you an interview for the job. Okay, so you should get a lot more interviews if you're using magic than if you're not. And if you don't, you should look at your magical procedure and see what's going on with it. And so that essentially is the kind of thing that we're talking about here. And why that shouldn't be out in the open, I just kind of don't get it. I've run across people who have this idea that, well, you're doing what you're doing, but if you use magic, you're cheating. Really? I spend, years developing a skill to be able to do this, but somehow I can't do it because it's cheating. I guess that would be the same as, getting an advanced education in something, right? And so now I have these skills that, maybe the person I'm interviewing against for a job, to continue the job metaphor, doesn't have. Well, is it cheating for me to use those skills? Is it cheating for me to demonstrate my intelligence? Is it cheating in any way for me to use my consciousness to do something? I would contend that it's not. And part of the point of that is that it's something that I think should be more normalized. And also, it should be pointed out that most magical techniques are not actually that hard or confusing to do in terms of the steps involved. Okay? I mean, I could do, pentagram, hexagram rituals, conjure a spirit after I drew its sigil, out of a grimoire, charge the spirit, license to depart, and then, to separate from the ritual. That's not really that complicated. Okay, I'm a software developer, and there's plenty of stuff that we do with software that is just way more complex than doing a magical operation in terms of the steps. Okay, the difference with magic is that, like meditation, okay, meditation is super simple to learn. There have been studies that have talked about mindfulness meditation. You find mindfulness meditation now all over the place among like Silicon Valley software developers, of people who don't do, anything related to magic at all. But because these studies have found that, there's, there are health benefits to meditation and to mindfulness in terms of both health and productivity. Okay. It's not even just, the executives you see, the companies will sponsor this. Hey, take this meditation class. And in a way, I think that's good. But on the other hand, what I see from companies too, I see this kind of self-serving thing that, well, okay, we'll teach our people to meditate so they can better handle all the stress we're putting on them that we wouldn't have to put on them if we just hired adequate staff. So there's that. So there are issues with it too. But you're not going to find any real thing in the world that doesn't have issues. Okay. And so, like meditation, magic is about doing it. Okay. It's not about, I learned some little trick from going through this grimoire, and all of a sudden now my magic works perfectly where it didn't work before. Those things generally don't exist unless you're talking about somebody who is, like a total new student who really doesn't know anything about magic but like pop culture. Okay, you got to learn that magic doesn't work like it does in Harry Potter. Okay, it's not Leviosa. That's not what this is about. You have to actually learn what it is. Okay, but once you understand what it is, really, what you got to do is you got to practice. And just like with meditation, okay, daily magical practice will give you far more benefits than reading any number of books or grimoires or taking classes or whatever, because you get better as you do that practice. Okay, and that can be everything from meditation up to including meditation plus ceremonial forms. If you include the ceremonial forms in addition to meditation, my experience is you tend to get better at using those particular forms in ritual. But at the same time, there are many other systems and approaches. I'm basically speaking from my own thelemic tradition, is that you'll do things like pentagram rituals like the star ruby, star sapphire, and some of the stuff out of Crowley's Liber O and those kinds of things. Those are the kinds of forms I'm talking about. And I will point out too, talking about the complexity of magic. Okay, so ritual the pentagram, ritual the hexagram, and several different meditation techniques. Okay, can be found in Crowley's Liber O, and Liber O is really short. This is a book, it's probably, I don't think it's even 15 pages. Okay, and that is most of what you need to know about forms. And then if you want to do work with spirits, okay, well, you're going to want to know, conjurations for the spirit, which are found in different grimoires. You're going to want to know the sigil of the spirit, or you can generate the sigil of the spirit using a method like Agrippa's Camilla method, which you can find in Agrippa's 3 Books of Occult Philosophy. You can also find it online. I think it's also available at Joe Peterson's Esoteric Archives. You search Joseph Peterson Esoteric. It's like esotericarchives.com or something like that. Or maybe it's an org. I don't remember exactly. But Peterson's stuff is good, and you can find Agrippa's stuff there. You can find how to do sigils on Camillas. A lot of that stuff, too, is in the magical instruction that I have linked to this video, which you can take a look at. And that also will tell you, if you look through like the planetary work, what you'll see how to do the spirit sigils on the Camilla of the planet and stuff like that. So, but okay, and so then the charge, okay, you got to know your injunctions and your limitations, what you want the spirit to do, what you don't want the spirit to do. So I want $1 million, but I don't want it from a life insurance policy I have on one of my loved ones. Real basic there. Okay, and then license to depart, close your ritual. Okay, that is literally the tack. Okay, and I mean, you can see I have more elaborate scripts written out for rituals like this with some additional pieces to it that our working group has liked over the years, either for technical or aesthetic reasons. But why this stuff isn't available and why you can't say, how do I do this? And you get, answers that are accurate. That is a problem with today's, golden age of magical information out there. There is so much information on magic now. The problem is that there's too much. Okay, it's like, so now people are sorting out, well, this person says this. What do you say to that? I get these kinds of questions all the time on the blog and in email. And it's like, well, we're not sharing results to the degree that we've got much real agreement. Okay. And so the thing about it is that it's frustrating because that very attitude makes people wonder, kind of look at magic. Okay, it's this. They're like, is that all there is? And then they go digging through stuff like this. So I heard a story from back when probably like 1995, I think it was. And so it was one of these things that was being posted, on back then it was like news groups and stuff like that. You didn't really have social media, but this is the thing that people were talking about online, right? And so it's from a file of, stories from tech support. And so it was like, so this person calls up and says, hey, I want to get on the National Information Superhighway. Okay. And so the tech support rep talks to the person, and this person has basically like every online service there is. Okay. And even stuff like Netcom, which was just like internet web stuff. Okay. And so they're like, well, yeah, you've got this. The person says, is that all there is? And hangs up. Okay. This is a thing. Okay. And people have the idea that because magic is hidden and because it's secret, performing magic must be complex. Okay. And it's not. Performing magic is pretty simple. It's just not easy. And the reason it's not easy is because it's simple, but it takes a lot of practice to get good at it and to get familiar with it and to be comfortable with the various consciousness processes that go on, just like meditation. Mindfulness meditation is one of the simplest things you can do. Okay. You sit down. You don't need to do a lotus or anything. You can just sit in a chair. As a lot of us get older, Crowley's Goddessana tends to be more what we use, just like, sitting in a chair with your spine upright. And so the meditation is this. Okay. So you observe your thoughts and you pay attention to your breath. And so you can count your breath if you want. You don't have to count your breath. You just need to put your attention on it. Sit there and you do that. And then your mind's going to wander, because it does. Don't let anybody tell you, oh, I can't meditate because my mind wanders too much. I have heard that from so many people as an excuse to not do this work. Okay. I have heard it from so many people. You'd be amazed. Okay. Because there's some stuff in magic that's ambiguous and it's kind of hard to read to get the interpretation exactly right out of it. They talk about this idea of meditation, is to still the mind. Okay. So the implication being that, well, if you meditate, the point of meditating is keep your mind from wandering. And that's not it. You do that, you're not going to succeed. What you want to do is pay attention to your breath. When your mind wanders, pull it back to the breath. Wanders, back to the breath. Wanders, back to the breath. You do that for your entire meditation session. Okay. No matter how many times your mind wanders, you can still do that. Okay. And also, it's not a competition. It's not a, well, my mind wandered only 4 times in that session, and I think it was 8. So clearly I'm more advanced than you. Nope. It's not like that either. Don't make it a competition. Making it a competition is bad. There is an article that I talk about. You can probably still find it on Google. It's called The Dark Side of Mindfulness. I mentioned it on these talks a couple of times. And these are interviews with several individuals who did mindfulness meditation and wound up developing, some real psychological problems as a result of it. And the common denominator, as far as I could tell from all the different stories, is it's this kind of interaction of one of the general assumptions of American culture with this technique, with the kind of the Asian idea of meditation, and they don't fit very well. And so one example would be, well, I wandered 8 times, you wandered 5, so I'm better. That's like that competitive thing. The other competitive thing is, well, I could do this for 20 minutes, so clearly I'm better off if I do it for 2 hours. You're really not. Okay. What I find in meditation is, if you go to a Zen center, okay, and you do, a fairly long session there, what you're going to do is you'll do like 20 minutes of sitting meditation. You'll do like 5 to 10 minutes of walking meditation, and maybe another 20-minute set of sitting meditation. That's the kind of stuff that is generally open to the public. And bear in mind, when I'm talking about this and making these comments, I'm not necessarily talking about meditation retreats with experienced meditation teachers. That's a different situation. And if you have a good teacher, yes, you can go on a retreat and just, meditate for days on end, with, whatever breaks you get. Okay. People can do that without having problems. But if people are doing this on their own and, hey, this technique is simple, I can just do it. And now I'm going to do it. And I did my 20 minutes and I feel like I want to go another 2 hours. Don't do that. Because a lot of what's going on there is you're thinking, oh, well, if this amount is good, several times, that must be several times better. And that really is not true. Okay. It's also not necessarily true in magical operations. So the more complicated a magical operation is, that doesn't necessarily mean it works better. Some really simple magical operations are, just very straightforward. You just have to practice them a lot. And when you get good at them, they're as good as, something big and long and complex. And so, again, that's a piece of information that people should know. It's not a competition is something that people should know. And they should know it because we're telling them. Okay? I put together all the stuff on magical instruction with all my commentaries on rituals and stuff like that. I have all the stuff out there on the blog that I do, that I've worked with, that I've found effective. Me and my magical working group, that's been around since about 2002. Okay. We haven't been that active in recent years. We've been doing more stuff with Leaping Laughter OTO over the last 5 years or so. But the point is that these are technical things that, are not the sort of thing that it's like so secret you have to dig into some ancient library and open it up and, oh, okay, so I have to put the sentences in the conjuration in this order instead of that order, and then mysteriously I get fireballs. No. That is not what magic is about. And again, I think it's a concept of, oh, well, if you can do one paranormal thing, you can do them all, right? And no, you can't. Probability gradients are real. The fact that James Randi, who claimed, oh, you can win $1 million from blah, 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 but first you have to do this preliminary test at your own expense. which we're going to set up with a probability gradient of 1,000 to 1 against that you could even pass. Okay. And well, nobody really passed that. Nobody could hit that probability mark. So there are no psychic powers. Well, the reality is that 1,000 to 1 on a magical operation is a lot. I don't think I've met anybody who can do that reliably. Okay. The best I ever did on a lottery spell was 17,468 to 1 against. And I did that twice over 200 to 300 plays. So really, if you divide the probability down, you're getting more into the, maybe the 1 to 500 against range. And that big, gaudy number is like, well, you're shifting it, but, you're not really shifting it that much. A lot of it is natural statistical variation, just shifted over a column by what you're doing magically. So the thing about that, though, is that if we understand those limits, and we have an idea of how powerful magic is, and we have an idea of, what kind of ability should you have as you get better at it. And I would also argue as you meditate and so forth for longer, because mysticism is the foundation of magic. So you need to be in a position where you can shift your consciousness in the ways that are necessary. And meditation is how you learn to shift your consciousness. So really, it's foundational. Okay. And you have to do meditation up until that point where you know your own mind, you know yourself well enough that you have an idea of how to direct your will and shift things when you're doing magic. Okay. And that's an ongoing thing. It could take a lifetime. And not necessarily being that good at it isn't really an excuse to not get going with magic. I actually don't think there are excuses to not get going with magic. Because again, it's an experiential discipline. It's all about doing it, okay? And experiencing what that is like when various magical things happen. And when you start out, you're not going to have much of that. You need to do it for a sustained period of time, preferably practice daily. You're going to do much, much better if you practice daily. You want to be careful about not overdoing it, though, like with meditation. Back many, many years ago, I would say that I came across more than one student who was like, well, so I did this and I actually did this practice. You said do this for 10 minutes and I did it for an hour instead. Aren't I badass? And well, okay. Before I had that knowledge and I had worked with people like that, I thought, well, that's cool. If you can do that, great. If it works for you, great. But here's what I find. People who do that level of intense practice almost always burn out. And when they do, they just abandon magic. It's like I'll do all this work to show what a badass I am, but then I'll think that magic is about all this work and I'll decide it isn't worth it. Maybe. I don't know if that's the process. That's just completely me speculating. I don't know if that's what it is. It could be what it is. I think it's probably part of it in that, people, they get to like a certain level in their practice and they feel like, oh, I'm a failure if I can only do, 20 minutes a day instead of this hour a day I was doing. And it's like, that is not what it's about. Okay. It's about exploring what you can do. It's about developing your abilities and in a way that works for you and works for your life. Okay. You shouldn't have to be, well, I'll maybe do some magic when I finally get rich enough to quit my job and then I can do this retreat or what. Don't do that. Because what's going to happen is you're never going to actually do it. Okay. If you say, all right, no, what I'm going to do is every day I'm going to sit down and I've got some daily practice stuff on the magical instruction page. I'm going to do my lesser ritual, the pentagram, lesser ritual, the hexagram, the middle pillar, or I'm going to do my star ruby, star sapphire, 11-fold seal. Okay. Basic stuff. And the reality, once you get those down, you can do them in under 10 minutes. Okay. And that's important to understand that you really can just practice magic 10 minutes a day. And it's going to be way better than, oh, well, I'll do like an hour on the weekends, but I can't do it during the week. No, 10 minutes a day is better. Okay. Meditation, 20 minutes a day is entirely sufficient. Okay. And so, you get 10 minutes of ceremonial practices, 20 minutes of meditation practice. Okay. If you do those two things, okay, you're spending a half hour on your practices. Okay. That's less than a regular length television program. Okay, and I think you will find that there are benefits, and you'll find there are a lot of benefits. The mindfulness meditation studies that showed that 10 to 20 minutes of mindfulness meditation, it triggered this thing called the relaxation response, which has all these health and wellness benefits. It triggered better cognitive reaction to stress and all this kind of stuff. And this was a study with a controlled term. So don't sit and meditate for hours and wind up with this dark side of meditation problem unless you have a very experienced teacher to guide you. You will get most of those results from a 20-minute session of meditation, because it's what happens with meditation is, in my experience, once the sessions start to get past a certain length, they get into kind of this, it's hard to explain, but you get into this kind of diminishing returns thing. I mean, I have sat in my life, a couple of times and done, like meditation for 2 hours straight. And it's like, I don't really think this is better. I think that if I did, my 20 minutes and I maybe pushed it to 30, I feel like I would have gotten about the same benefit. Maybe that's because I'm not, maybe that's because, I'm not at like the level in meditation practice where, you could do all sorts of other stuff. That is possible. I have meditated for quite a few years though, and generally taking like a mindfulness-like approach. And, I have studied with a couple of meditation teachers. And yeah, one of the meditation teachers, by the way, with the mind wandering stuff, I love this story. And so I keep telling it. I probably said it in other videos. But okay, so the teacher was asked, well, how do I know that I'm being successful in my meditation practice? And the teacher said, well, are you doing your meditation practice? And they said, yes. And then the teacher said, then you are being successful in your meditation practice. It's about doing it. Even if your mind can wander a zillion times, but the fact is, if you sit there for that 20 minutes, you keep reining it back, the practice still works. And here's what you will find. So this idea about stilling the mind, okay, what you will find is it's not that you're forcing your mind to like do whatever, okay? What happens is that concentrative back to the breath, you become more and more accustomed to it over time, but over a period of time. And what's going to happen is you will find that as you do it, you're going to start noticing, hey, my mind is wandering a little bit less than it was, 4 months ago or 5 months ago. Even if your mind wanders all over the place, still do the practice and notice that. And remember, you're not in competition with anybody. You're only comparing to yourself. And that's really what in terms of, how often does my mind wander? You know what? The important thing is that you're sitting down and doing the practice. That is something that people should be aware of. It's not a big secret. It's not something where, okay, I'm sitting down and my mind is wandering, so I'm doing something wrong and I have to look up some special secret, okay? You don't. The secret is perseverance, which can accomplish all things, according to both the Masonry and the Golden Dawn. Persistence and perseverance can accomplish all things. And it's about doing it, and it's about sticking with it. And that probably is the best, exoteric secret I can tell you. Do the practices. Don't worry about, little technical mistakes. Do them to the best of your ability. If you have questions, by all means, ask other practitioners. And other practitioners should not be jerks about this. And I'm going to sum up with that. I see a lot of this online, and it drives me nuts, okay? You have these people out there who, have books and classes. Hey, I got books and classes. I have the Enochian Master Class on my blog, Mastering the Mystical Mastering the Great Table. And I've got articles in the Holy Guardian Angel Anthology and the Liber Spiritum Anthology. You can look all that stuff up on my website, scottstanwick.com or ananial.blogspot.com. You can look all that stuff up. I've got all that stuff. But you know what? When people get such a kind of a mood or this idea that I want to be a personality. I don't want to be a person. I want to be like, I don't know, like what the magical equivalent of a celebrity or something like that. And I do appreciate the irony of a person broadcasting on a YouTube channel saying this. But if you're going to do that, you really are contributing to the problem. Okay? If it's something like, and I understand occult books don't sell very well. And I understand that a lot of people, oh, my book has secrets. So you have to have my book. You can't work off somebody else's book. What are those secrets? Well, you've got to buy a book, or you've got to buy this class that I'm doing. It turns into this like infomercial thing, right? And then at these discussions between people, and you get these arguments, well, you're doing it wrong, you're doing it wrong. People who are new post questions and they just get made fun of. It's like, I mean, no wonder magic is seen as esoteric and insular with people behaving like that. People report their experiences. I did this ritual, I got this result. Okay, usually they're not very detailed, and that can be a downer. You want to know which version of the ritual, what was the context, what were you trying to do, and so on. I mean, you need more information to really make a judgment. But then to say, oh yeah, you're just doing it wrong. It's like, with no explanation. It's like, how is this person ever going to learn anything? It's like, they wanted to, they were interested enough in magic that they wanted to, they did something happened that they thought was weird. And so they want to pose to, okay, well, what does this mean? What could this mean? A lot of the time it has to do with, well, these are, passing thoughts and they'll disappear, as you're doing your work. But, you can have situations like, I started doing practice and now my psychic senses are turned on and I'm realizing there's this psychic stuff going on around me. Psychic stuff goes on around you all the time. That's one of the other secrets of magic. It's just, if you're not paying attention to it, you don't notice it. And it's not a question of, oh, magic is dangerous because it attracts all this stuff. I've talked about that one too. That's not what it is. It's that you turned your psychic senses on and now you're seeing stuff you didn't see before, but it was there before. It's this kind of stuff is happening all over the place, and then sometimes it's, well, you're getting a psychic impression, then it's getting mixed up with a thought of yours and so on. And so, meditating on the experience, focusing on, just like the back to the breath, sit there, focus, mind wanders. And then sometimes when you're focusing on a particular memory or whatever, you'll get some real insight out of it. So journal that, write that insight down when you're done with your meditation session. But I mean, that's really what you do. It's not, I want to get onto, this forum, the moderator is so-and-so who thinks magic works this way, even though, half the magical community disagrees with them. Oh, you're an idiot if you don't see it my way, and, just, get off this forum. I mean, how does that help anybody? Let's be people, not personalities. Let's share technology. Let's develop the discipline, just like if we were scientists. And in fact, I would argue that we are scientists. We are scientists of the psychic and what is commonly called the spiritual. And those two things are themselves manifestations of consciousness, which is what we're really working with. Whether it's our consciousness, a spirit's consciousness, a deity's consciousness, all these things are manifestations of consciousness. And that is what we do with magic. And let me furthermore add one more point, that because magic works with consciousness, that doesn't mean magic is real and everything else is unreal or illusion. That's not true, okay? The reality is, when you do practical magic and you do a lot of spells working on the physical world pushes back. It pushes back just fine. It is not illusionary in the way that we normally understand it, okay? The universe is permeated with consciousness, but consciousness shifts and probability shifts are relatively weak effects. And by weak, I don't mean unimportant. I think I talked about this last week. I mean that they are not anywhere near as effective or reliable as just doing a straight, physical manipulation of something. And they are essentially, two different ways of looking at reality. And really, the correct way of looking at reality is to treat matter, spirit, consciousness as part of a whole that expands throughout the universe and possesses both local and non-local components. Neither is better. They are complementary. They give rise to the reality we have. Or I suppose, if you are a Thelemite, your point is Hadit, infinite space is Nuit. The interaction between those 2 points, which is basically any magical operation or whatnot, is Rahu Kuit. The crowned and conquering child, the bringer of the Aeon of Horus, right? And so with the formula that is life and growth, as opposed to this, death and sacrifice, And with that, I think should come openness. Life and growth is a process that is open. It happens all the time. You look at a plant, hey, look, it's growing. There's nothing about that that is ooky spooky or edgy or whatever. It's just nature and the way nature works. And I think that this whole idea of looking at nature, looking at the totality of nature, and understanding that, and also understanding that we human beings, we're as much a part of nature as anything else. What we do with our consciousness is as much a part of nature as anything else. That is what is going to get us to a true exoteric understanding of magic. So, ran a little longer than usual with the introduction tonight, but I think I'm going to wrap it up there. We will be back next week, same time, same channel. Hey, I can actually say channel because I'm on YouTube now. And we'll be continuing the discussion of magic, and we'll be continuing the discussion of ritual techniques. I may very well next week do an Exotericism part 4, or I might drift off into some other area, but we'll see. Next Tuesday, 8 p.m. Central, that's where we'll be. Also, a quick announcement for people who are following Leaping Laughter OTO, Leaping Laughter events. This Saturday, we are going to be doing an online event with Lou Flores on the Orisha traditions. This is the continuation of a talk that Lou gave earlier this year. It was a great talk, lots of extra material. So we're going to do more, and that's going to be happening this Saturday. I'm not sure that the time on the event is 4 p.m. Central. I'm not sure if that has been absolutely confirmed. So keep notice on the event. If it winds up being different, we can make an announcement about that. And I hope we'll see you there. Lou is a great practitioner. His previous talk was excellent, and I hope that you will be there. And I also hope we'll be seeing you next week, next Tuesday, 8 p.m. Central, for our next in this series of Ritual Night Talks. Thanks for watching, and have a great rest of the evening. Love is the law. Love endure well.